want to tell you a story. I'm 10 years into my career. I've worked at a series of top New York City ad agencies. I'm at the point in my career where I'm not satisfied with working my way up or continuing to work my way up the corporate ladder. I believe at this point I had the secret to success. I just launched a series of high-profile campaigns for big healthcare, specifically big pharma, the biggest pharma companies in the world. I created their first strategies leveraging social media. And from a branded perspective, it was a very big deal because A, nobody had ever done that before, but B, the knock was always regulatory environments in a pharmaceutical company are never going to let you do this kind of work. Long story short, was very successful, convinced them to launch a campaign. They launched it, and it absolutely blew up. It was the first time that patients could communicate directly with the pharmaceutical company and engage in what I called bilateral dialogue, where instead of just one-way communication, blasting at patients nonstop, patients had the opportunity to actually respond and get answers about a treatment, about a disease area directly from the pharmaceutical company. And they loved it. The response, as I said, was big. So I took the formula in doing that and started my own company. I'm just starting out. Once any type of compete clauses or exclusivity clauses have run out, I'm engaging some of the clients that I'd worked with in the past. One of those clients is a major pharmaceutical company based in the UK. If you know anything about big pharma, you'll probably know the company I'm talking about. So I fly over there to meet with this client that I'd worked with in the past, but never within my own company or in the context of my own company. So one, it's a big deal that I get a meeting with this guy. He is not taking meetings with just anybody, but because of I'd built a good reputation. I delivered really high quality, solid work for him for a year plus, maybe a year and a half. I wouldn't say that yes, he trusted me, I suppose, sure. But I think he knew that the work that I'd done for him in the past was innovative, and he looked at me as someone who was really pushing the boundaries in media, healthcare, and technology. So he ends up taking the meeting with me. Even before that, I fly over on Virgin. This is Virgin Atlantic. I'm about to get on the plane. I guess I cashed in my frequent flyer miles and got a first class ticket. But as I'm walking on, there's this man, 2 or 3 people in front of me walking into the plane. And he's got jeans on. He has a white button-down shirt. There's like purple inlay fabric. He has the sleeves rolled up. You could just tell it was an expensive shirt. He's dressed nicely, but what struck out to me the most is this is not a young man, but he had shoulder-length hair. And the hair was not gray as much as it was silver, like this silvery mane. And he's surrounded by women. I'm like, who is this guy? And as I'm listening to him talk, because he's having a conversation with the stewardess, and then the captain comes out and starts to have a conversation with him. This whole time, all I'm seeing is his back and his hair, his silvery mane, this very expensive shirt with purple cuffs and the jeans. Finally, he turns around. It's Richard freaking Branson. And he proceeds to walk around the plane. And I'm not even kidding. This guy shook everybody's hand. He was the nicest, most nice, kind, but really wanted to understand. Are you having a good experience? Have you flown Virgin before? What other airlines do you fly? He really wanted to know about you, which I thought was a really big deal. So I meet Richard Branson on this flight. I think to myself, wow, this is going to be a good trip. This is going to be a productive trip. I'm going to walk into this client. I'm going to wow him. I'm going to win this business. I'm going to secure it. And this is going to be a big stepping stone for me as I grow this company. So I get off the plane. Branson, by the way, does not carry any bags with him. And I actually asked one of the flight attendants, is this typical? The guy walks on the plane, doesn't have a single bag. She's like, yeah, he has houses all over the world. All the clothes that he needs is at the house. He doesn't need to travel with clothes. I'm like, what if he has to stay at a hotel? She's like, he owns those too. I'm like, okay, good point. Good point. It's nice to be a billionaire. So Richard Branson on the plane, very cool experience. My hopes are high that I'm going to secure this client. I get off the plane. It was a red eye. It's probably 8 o'clock in the morning. I got a little bit of sleep on the plane, maybe. One of the cool things I will say at the time about these Virgin flights is that they're 747s. There's 2 stories. You can walk up this little like spiral staircase if you're in first class to get up to this second floor bar, air bar or sky bar, I think they called it. And you're sitting, flying 550, 600 miles per hour, drinking martinis or gin and tonics with very dry gin on the plane. They're very big on their dry gin, which I prefer Tanqueray, but I think this was Gordon's. So that was cool. I did not have too many of those in this trip because I knew I had my client meeting the next day. I needed to be as clear-headed as possible. And even more importantly, I'm big. I'm not a great sleeper, but I try to get it when I can. So I get off the plane. I go right to the taxi queue. The cabs in London they're black cabs. They're very different from cabs in New York or the United States. They have a dome-like back seat that was apparently designed for accessibility with 2 benches that face each other. There's one right behind the driver and then one across from that. So if you're in the back, you would be facing, if you're on one bench, the 2 other people who are sitting in the back with you. And maybe someone's next to you. I bring this up because it's very annoying because you put your roller bag in the back of this cab. I don't really think there's a trunk. And it just rolls around because it's these 2 benches with a big space in between. You're kind of trying to, pull up your iPad or your computer to prepare for the meeting. At the same time, all you're doing is using your other hand to kind of maneuver the bag so it doesn't keep slamming back and forth between these 2 benches. I digress because that's not really important. What is important is I pull up to this pharmaceutical company. I want to say maybe it's 45 minutes outside of London or an hour from the airport. I pull up. The building is brand new. It's gleaming. It's glass. It's a sunny day, which is somewhat rare in the UK, in and or around London. Architecture, it's very angular. The sun is shining through. I walk in, I check in at reception. It's this very cheeky British lady who checks me in, instructs me to wait, which I do. Finally, she's like, okay, Andrew will see you now. So she brings me up, not to his office, and I'm not sure why, but the building is new, but they had this sort of, not a cafeteria. It almost looked like a restaurant. It was very new and sleek. Everything is glass and silver and steel. And we're sitting outside of what is this kind of like restaurant / cafeteria type space. And this is where he meets with me. There's a sort of fountain in the center of this atrium. It's all very corporate, but very well done, tasteful. And I'm like, okay, he's going to meet me here. It's a little distracting, but that's fine. I've had meetings in odder places. He walks up. He shakes my hand, motions for me to sit at this little banquette. And before I even get a word out, he puts both of his hands out in front of him in a sweeping gesture, cocks his head to the side, and goes, "So, what have you got for me?" And I'm like, okay, we're going from 0 to 60 real fast here. It is clear he wants me to get right into it. There will be no decks. There will be no small talk. There will be no pleasantries. This is a man who's very important, who's pressed for time, and who wants me to get to the point. I end up fumbling through the conversation. It's very rare that I'm looking at my watch, but I'm anxious to get to the 30-minute mark because that's how much time he's allotted for me. And at the end of the conversation, he thanked me, went his way, and I never heard from him again. I've got to say, I don't blame him. I was not prepared. And this was a watershed moment for me. This was a learning moment. When you're meeting with a client, you're meeting with a friend, a partner, somebody you're networking with, you always need to be prepared. Well, of course you need to be prepared. What are you telling me that I don't already know? That's not what I mean. What I mean is that one of the secrets to business is having a perspective. It is understanding the domain you are in, the sector you are in, the business you are in, ingesting all of the data, all of the noise on the market, on as it relates to your sector, on your competitors, on the latest trends and innovations. It's taking in all of that data, ingesting it, and distilling it down into, for lack of a better term, a series of highly memorable sound bites. And I don't mean sound bites in such a way that they're empty or hollow or meaningless. I mean that you should be able to, at the flip of a switch, turn on. You should be able to turn on. You should be able to light up a room, light up a conversation with a client, a prospective boss, partner, whatever. You should be able to wax poetic on your subject matter. And that is what Andrew was expecting me to do. The majority of the plane trip, and I'm sure so many of you can relate to this, I was buried nose deep, face up against the screen in a PowerPoint presentation, honing, refining. Is this the right picture for this particular slide? Is the text the right font? Is he going to like this font? Is he going to like the layout? What's going to matter is that when he reflects on his day later, is he going to go, wow, that well-dressed New Yorker who sat across from me had this crazy hot take. So much so, I've got to go online. I've got to research this. The things you were telling me, they were really, really interesting and innovative and unique. I almost didn't believe it, but he had the data to support it. He had an incredible argument to be made around it, and he's given me a lot to think about. He's given me an entirely new lens through which to view my domain. Or is he going to eat his dinner, drink his martini, and you will have been utterly forgettable? You do not want to be forgettable. I will tell you that. You need to have a perspective. Stick around and I'll tell you exactly how to do this. There are three ways that I like to think about creating a hot take. First, identify a trend the client has heard of. They don't have to have heard of it, but if you're spending half the time explaining the trend to them, you're not spending time digging into how you can make it work for them. So I tend to like to talk about a trend that I believe they've heard about, but I talk about it in a very specific way, in a way that's going to impact their business. Here's an example. I'm talking to a pharmaceutical company. They're investing in artificial intelligence. They're aware of this trend, but I ask them how they're using it. They say things like, well, we're using AI to increase speed to data. We're using it in our research and development process and all the scientific work that's being done. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But did you know that you can also use AI to dramatically cut down on the time it takes to do medical, legal, regulatory reviews? You can use AI to help better identify clinical trial participants and then segment them from an advertising and retargeting perspective. And I start to go through all the other applications and use cases that they may not have heard of. This is a very, I think, basic example because at this point, everybody's been AI'd to death. But as you've heard me talk about before, there's aspirational AI and practical AI. In the context of this trend, I am giving them very practical AI examples, how they can deploy it in their business and probably even are using it already, but might not know to a greater extent. The second way to think about a hot take is, and this is one of my favorite ways, take a contrarian viewpoint. An example here. This is 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The media is awash in articles about Google and deprecating cookies. So the phrase cookieless future is being used to an unbelievable extent. I'm talking to clients. What I am telling them is that cookieless future doesn't matter. It does not matter. The amount of money companies are spending to work in this new cookieless ecosystem Google is designing is insane. Instead, worry less about Google, because even if they do release this, it's not going to be for years out, and it's probably going to change 18,000 times between now and then. So worry less about them. Worry more about increasing regulation, the likes of which we're seeing in Europe, GDPR being an example. I said GDPR is going to come to the US at the state level at first, and then through federal or national regulation. It's going to start to minimize the way that advertisers can target their audiences. And to mitigate this, focus on building out your first-party data infrastructure so that no matter what happens, you're in a position of power, curating and containing your own data. This happened to be a correct assessment of the landscape. GDPR regulations have been imposed in a number of states. In California, California Consumer Privacy Act is a perfect example of this. Many clients were like, wow, this is not what I'm hearing from anybody else. Chase is telling me that I don't need to worry about Google right now. Instead, I need to be more concerned about myself. Thirdly, the third way to develop a hot take, make a bold claim or prediction. My prediction was, this is 2.5 years ago, beginning of 2022. This is what I'm telling clients. I'm saying, client, only 25% of Americans will be subscribed to linear TV in 2026. I'm out between January and summer of 2022, really the whole year in 2022. I'm out delivering this narrative, saying things like the massive decline in linear TV viewership and the lack of traction in CTV is going to conspire to create a really interesting scenario. And at the time, Netflix was the only profitable streamer. The data and measurement landscape was highly fragmented. It actually still is. So my point was, if you think, client, that you can divest from linear TV and put those dollars directly into CTV and get a like-for-like return, you're going to be sorely mistaken. Right now, there is an attention gap, and your target's attention is actually not on linear TV or CTV, but on social media, specifically vertical video platforms like YouTube, Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels. I was out on the speaking circuit, writing articles, doing interviews, getting bylines on this exact subject years before the mainstream media finally caught up and started to talk about just how much attention share social has claimed from TV. And now it's a very hot topic of conversation. That said, the more I talked about this, the more clients I got in front of, the more people started to really lean into this narrative. All of a sudden, I'm invited, as I said, to speak at conferences. People wanted more and more of really explain to me how this is going to work. What's the rationale? What data are you looking at? How are you making this prognostication? And the point is, I was in the center of the conversation. I was the catalyst of the conversation. I was memorable. And that is what you want to be. If you combine the ability to identify a trend, but I should say you can combine multiple hot take seeds that I'm talking about. The trend identification, 1, 2, contrarian viewpoint, 3, make a bold claim or prediction. You can mix and match, combine. It's like accessorizing. You can throw on a bunch of different outfits here. But the point is that you're bold, you're memorable, you're not saying what everybody else is saying. And it's not take a contrarian viewpoint just to take it. It's you need to be different to cut through the noise. This is a great way to do it. Have a hot take, have a perspective, and you will leave an indelible imprint on the mind of your audience. And that is what you want to do to be memorable, because if you can do that, you're going to succeed in whatever you're trying to accomplish. In business, in life, in storytelling, be memorable. This is a way to do it. This is Capital Chase Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Chase. We have 2 to 3 episodes dropping each week. Tune in for more. Thanks for listening.